You're not getting grants though?
Welcome to the Oregon City Council Committee of the Whole meeting for July 17th, 2023, and the time now is 7:09. And we'll start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. To start this meeting, we do have a delegation, persons and delegations that does want to speak tonight regarding the Oregon Senior Center. And I would ask Ms. Paula Benton to come to the front and give us a rundown of what's going on with this levy. Thank you. Thank you.
You just hand me through.
You got a shirt for me, Paul?
I'd like to start first with thanking everybody for having me come tonight and to talk about our levy. We're all excited. This will be our third time to be on the ballot. The time has passed so quickly. Been a lot of changes, a lot of things done. So what I gave you is a outline of kind of what we used to do compared to what we do now. And just hit the major topics of activities, programs, and things of that nature that we do. We, in this time, since the first levy, since 2014, we moved into the new building on Navarre Avenue, which was one of our major endeavors. So since that inception, we've had a very trial and tribulations of getting the building to task where we needed it and getting things done, working out all the quirks and things. So I'm very comfortable about this levy just because we've been through it a couple times. We know what to expect, where to go, and where to present our plea for our levy to pass this fall. So what I gave you, like I said, is kind of a synopsis of what we do. And this only pertains to basically the programs, the activities, the transportation, the nutrition that is funded through the levy. It's funded also by the Area Office on Aging. The Area Office on Aging gives us about $69,000 a year that we write a grant for every 4 years. And that has remained pretty steadfast since the beginning of the levy and before that. We were at $79,000. I started about 18 years ago, and there was a big slump in the economy. And so they took about $10,000 away from our pot of money from the county levy and from Title IIIB funds. So, and we've remained the same since then. But there's just nowadays with so many seniors and the baby boomers aging in, there's a lot of them. So the pie just gets cut smaller and smaller every time. If you want to just like drift through there, and if you have any questions about anything, I'll be glad to answer them. We still maintain to kind of run on a very tight budget because, in fact, our seniors are still paying for this levy also. So we're spending their money for them, and then the rest of Oregon is included too. And we want to be very wise with how we spend the dollars.
Paula, how many members do you have right now?
Right now I have about 450. When we went from Bay Shore, we had 238 members. We moved to Navarre Avenue, and in 3 months we went to over 600 members. So we had a lot of growing pains. A lot of things changed, so many people to deal with, things going on that we never did. We had to make um, room for, like, our line dancers went from 3 or 4 people to 12 to 20 people. So lots of things had to be adjusted and all the quirks had to be worked out. But we've since accomplished that, and we have never dropped our programs, our activities. We try to always have them gain, but we did have a problem during COVID, which I think just about everybody does. And it's kind of a trend right now not only not to volunteer, but not to be a member of things. I think most social clubs are hurting for members, hurting for volunteers, and we're no different. We have the seniors, our core bunch of seniors that's always there helping and working and doing their part to keep the senior center alive and active. So the parts of the senior center that the city levy monies is used for is for our nutrition. Our nutrition is made by the Area Office on Aging and delivered at lunchtime. We're still in that COVID mode because we're still serving on disposables, disposable plates, cups, knives and forks, that sort of thing. We have a free breakfast on Tuesday morning and Thursday morning. And at the same time, I'd like to invite you all to come out and join us. The seniors really enjoy the interaction. We have policemen that stop in once in a while. We've had different people throughout the time there that people stop in. Many of the council people used to come out, but they were all here when we went through the transition of going from trying to support with no money at all to having money after having the levy passed. We have health and wellness programs. Health and wellness has to do with fitness and exercise, eating. We have a class that's called Leaner Senior in the spring, and that's to get everybody back into their summer weight. And then we have the rest of the year, we have a class that takes over and just, it's an open discussion about anything they really want to talk about. And they discover new things and go on trips and things together. We have an outreach coordinator. She, which is funded by the city, she does the newsletter and all of the Facebook, all the social media. Socialization and recreation is not funded by anybody, and that's what they want to do. Everybody wants to play bingo. We had our annual meeting last week, and they wanted to add another day of bingo, and I think 3 days of bingo is plenty, but they would like to add a 4th day of bingo. So those things are not considered a payable exercise, but there's a lot of argument there too, because the cognitive thinking is so important, and there's nothing better than bingo to do that. We have educational speakers. We try to always vet our speakers to make sure they are who they say they are and they do know what they're talking about. Because upon times I've had speakers come in and I don't always agree with what they have to say. So I try to get involved in those conversations. Supportive services is a service that if a senior needs help with paying their bills, they can't figure out what they owe, or they can't get a hold of the electric company, or they got a letter to do jury duty and are really above the age of having to do it, or don't feel physically they can do that, we type a letter and send it in for them. And then we do offer legal assistance, and that's maybe a few weeks every year. We have an attorney come in, they sign up, and they can get a little conference, and she will guide them, or he will guide them in which directions to go. The senior center is operated with 8 part-time employees and 1 full-time. I'm the full-time person. So during COVID, we had a real struggle with having to pay people more money. We couldn't get drivers to drive the vehicles. And at that time during COVID, we weren't meeting within the center. So most of our business, most of our services was to do with escorts and transports. So we had to increase salaries quite a bit. Our future hope is to someday add a program director. We kind of all fill in as program director, and we all help with the cleaning and things like that. On the front of this is our mission statement. So everything we do, we try to refer back to that. We want people to remain in their homes and adjusted, still have a quality of life, still be able with our transportation and grocery delivery and things of that nature. It lets them to remain at home and not have to go into a facility or move in with their children. And we don't restrict that to just one class of people. It's open to anybody from any walk of life. We do sit in a precarious place. The Oregon levy pays for the Oregon residents, 60 years of age and older, but we are surrounded by Ottawa and Wood County. And then we have Curtis residents, we have Walbridge residents, we have East Toledo. And some things are paid for. If it's paid for by the Oregon levy, they have to be 60 and they have to be a citizen of Oregon within the city limits, not just an Oregon mailing address. And sometimes we get hung up on that because somebody will slip through the crack, because you can be in Jerusalem Township and still have an Oregon address. So, you know, a lot of those things go into place. We have people who are just lonely. And so having the senior center, we are back now from COVID. We're back to the full-time operation. And last year was a very big year for us because we had been closed for almost 2 years. So we had to open up, have to restock and reacquaint with everybody. We still today have seniors that won't go out of their homes. They're still afraid to go out of their homes. We told them for 2 years not to go out, not to always wear a mask, don't intermingle with large crowds and things like that. And so now we have to retrain that way of thinking again. So that's our main goal, is to keep everyone busy and alert and active and still contributing to the community. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Thank you, Paula. Council, any questions?
Yes, Mr.
Mr.
President.
Wanzek.
Thank you, Mr. President. Yeah, I have a couple questions. What do you think are the 2 to 3 largest contributing expenditures for the senior center?
Food and the transportations.
Okay.
We have a 14 seat bus and we have a 7-seat van. And the
And
14
how are
passenger-
those?
Pardon?
Are they in good condition?
Yeah, the 14 passenger van was purchased in 2019, so it's fairly new. The smaller van, I accidentally backed into my other car at home, so it has a dent in the trunk, and that's going to be fixed. But they're both we've taken very good care of them. And during COVID, we had to use the small van because there was CARES Act money, and we were delivering food to people's homes. So we had an average of 50 a week that we would take the food directly to their home, which we were never allowed to do before because the Area Office on Aging did that whole program. But as it became such a need, they let us do our own surrounding communities.
Is that service continuing?
No, that service was discontinued on May 13th of this year. So we no longer do that. And I do have a little note here I wanted to share with you. When we met as a group and we discussed whether to go for a renewal or a replacement, we looked at all aspects of what we do and what has changed. And transportation had a big change with the smaller van. If you average it out to 50 escorts, an escort pays $22.65 and a transport pays $19.22. So if you average out 50 trips a month, 50 trips a week times 4 weeks, and figure it all out, we are going to save about $56,000 right off the bat there. And we just fill out a paper now, we send it to the AOA, and they deliver it. And if you don't know, the AOA is the Area Office on Aging, and we fall under Northwest Ohio.
Now, I know when we originally spoke about the levy some years ago, there was talk about contracting transportation services through like a black and white cab.
Right.
Are we able to do stuff like that to
Yes,
provide
we
more
do.
services and then they charge you on the escort or the transport?
Right. And we do that especially with black and white cab because we do not have a wheelchair accessible bus, but they do. So we use them for any wheelchair transports. And the Oregon levy does pay for that.
Is there a restriction on the number of transports an individual can utilize in a month?
Not at this time because we've never exceeded a number that is alarming. There was a time when we had a senior using it about twice a week and I was getting worried about that. But at this time we have a contract. It does not stipulate how many times we can do it, but we can change that contract anytime.
And where can the transports, are they just to the doctors? Are they to the grocery? Are they to family members' houses? Where can people utilize your services for transport?
With black and white, it has to be medical. And we usually use it to go across the river. But once in a while, there's somebody that needs a, 5 o'clock in the morning trip to the hospital and they operate 24 hours a day. We also have a contract with Caravan. Caravan is another transportation system that's ran through Dr. Riza. And when it first started, I think it was basically out of St. Charles. And we pay them for trips for the seniors that they transport, and they only do medical transport. So both of those contracts are for medical purposes.
And then
With our buses, we take them to the grocery store, the post office, the library, anything that is essential to their existence.
okay. Now, who puts restrictions or is there literature in the levy language that restricts where you cannot utilize it for socialization and recreation with the levy funds? I know area office and agent funds are different. Can you utilize levy funds on that, or is there something written into
No.
the levy
There's
itself?
nothing written. It's just when we did the levy in 2013 and 14, we basically copied what the area office on aging does.
Okay.
Kind of like the letter of the law. And we, at that time, Kathy Huffer was here, and we utilized their language to keep it all in line.
Okay. And the reason I'm questioning or asking these questions is there's seniors that don't even understand the services that you provide. So I'm trying to ask some questions that I know the answers to so that we can get that information out to the
Right.
public.
I understand that.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walzak. Council, any other questions or comments for Ms. Ben?
Mr. President,
Mr. Drake?
Paula, how many people on average, just a ballpark figure, are at the senior center, say, each day?
Okay, each day is different. Thursday's our big day, and we're probably 80 to 100 people in and out throughout the day. Monday is our slow day. We keep Mondays for potlucks and things of that nature, for cleaning carpets, all those heavy-duty things. But every day we have different activities, programs, and things going on. We have people playing cards. We have people line dancing, ballroom dancing, fitness classes. So every day is different. But every day we have 40 to 50 people.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Ms. Benton.
Okay,
It was
thank
very
you.
informative. Thank you very much.
Don't ever hesitate to stop by. We'd love to have you.
Mr. President,
Thank you.
can I ask Paula one more question?
Yes, Mr. Walzak?
Thank you. Paula, where can the people get the information for the senior center if they want to utilize their services that have not utilized them yet? If they don't know about this, they're just learning, where can they find the information?
They could call us. We'll send them out the newest newsletter, which has everything we do in it. It's pretty explanatory.
Are you on social media,
We are
Facebook?
on Facebook.
Okay, so you have Facebook, Twitter, Instagram,
Yes.
all the social medias where they can contact you, find out what's going on at your center so that there's ways that they can gain that knowledge.
Right.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walzak. Continuing on, council, we have some items for consideration this evening. And the first item for discussion is item 100, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and City Administrator Joel Major. And I'll defer to Mr. Major.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you, members of council. One thing I wanted to point out, Paula, thank you for your presentation. One thing I wanted to point out is that in the budget, we have the levy brought in about $225,000 per year. Correct. And I'm using just round numbers. And with this renewal, it will actually increase by about $24,000 per year to $249,000 per year. And the reason for that is just because of new construction and because it is a renewal, it's the same millage, it's not an increase. But because of new construction, it brings in additional revenue, new construction from over the past 5 years. So, and that, the committee did meet. There was a really hard discussion about that, about going for a replacement or versus a renewal. And I believe the committee, as you stated, the committee met and which was comprised of staff, board members, and others. And it was decided that a renewal would be sufficient. And, we tend to agree, but it also is, because there isn't $24,000 increase per year, it still is, keeping up with inflation is something that we're just going to have to watch, because last year, if you recall, we did have a supplemental at the end of the year to help with the operating expenses of the senior center. So I wanted to point that out, and not that it's a mystery or anything, because we did talk about it during the budget time. We'll probably talk about this as a budget line item for next year as well. So I believe right now, well, I always go, again, you know me now, I always go to the beginning of the year when we talk about budgets, because that's a true snapshot of where we're at. When we carry balances over, as you get into the year, you're spending money at different times of year. So it's hard to, if you say, how much do we have in the account right now? I don't feel like it's a true picture, but at the beginning of the year, we had about $85,000 in the balance of that fund. So it sits in a semi-healthy position, and 24,000 a year increase is what the renewal would bring in if it's put on the ballot, if council approves of it, and if it passes. And I don't have anything additional to add to that unless Nick does.
Thank you, Mr. Major. Council, you have any questions for Mr. Major regarding this item? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to place item 100, 2023 on next week's regular meeting agenda.
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak?
so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak.
Second.
Second by Mr. Walzak. Thank you, Mr. Walzak. Counselor, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 100, 2023 will be moved to next week's regular meeting agenda. The next item is item 101, 2023. And this is presented by Mayor Michael J. Safarian and Public Service Director Paul Roman. And I will defer to Mr. Roman on this.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance is needed to enter into the last two right-of-way acquisition agreements for the Otter Creek Stream and Floodplain Restoration Project. The net take or amount of land, along with the negotiated dollar values listed in Exhibit A. All of the properties were properly appraised. In regard to the Bowers property, it's a little different. A portion of their property is also in the city of Toledo. And with that portion along the creek, we are just asking for a conservation easement. That would be much easier than an actual take from another city. And that's all we need for the project. And they want to retain the rest of their property as well. They do work for the city of Toledo. So that's it. And happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions from Mr. Roman regarding this item? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to move item 101, 2023 to next week's regular meeting agenda.
Mr. President.
Mr. Dan.
So
Mr.
moved.
Mr. Davish, I'm sorry.
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second, Mr. Horniak. Thank you, Mr. Horniak. Counselor, are there any objections? Hearing no objections, item 101 will be moved to next week's regular meeting agenda. Next item for discussion is item 102, 2023, presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Finance Director Nick Roman, and I will defer to Mr. Roman.
Thank you, Mr. President. This resolution is to accept the petition to improve Brown Road by way of installation of a sanitary sewer. So basically, Sean and Stacy Fedrick went out with a petition to residents on Brown Road between 422 feet east of Coy Road to 1,079 feet east of Coy Road. And they did receive over the 50% mark of frontage approving of this petition. So this is the first step. This would be to accept the petition, which would, we would request the Public Service Department to get together estimates for the cost of the project. And then the next step would be to look at it and decide if we want to move forward. That's basic overview. If there's questions, please let me know.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Council, any questions or comments for Mr. Roman on this item?
Mr. President,
Mr. Horniak.
if I could, I'm going to ask the other Mr. Roman in the room. Paul, I had asked you some questions prior to us coming into the meeting today. Can you walk through the process of this and the importance of the 52.4% or whatever it was that they have and the likelihood of moving forward with this and timeline?
Yep, and yes, Mr. President, Mr. Horniak, and, as we talked earlier, I had mentioned, Ohio Revised Code and Melissa and the mayor, we're talking a little bit about this subject. And it is about what is the percent required to pass a petition or accept a petition. I think the Ohio Revised Code has 60%. But home rule, as a city, you can go with anything over 50%. I think even on Navarre with the sidewalk, they didn't have quite 60, but we felt there was a need and we approved it over, as long as it was over 50%. You can order, the city can choose to order in a sewer, EPA can order in a sewer, or it can be petitioned like it's before you. Normally when it's above 50%, we say, all right, well, the majority are asking for this. The steps in this process would be to design and come up with the front foot cost. What the good news is, small projects like this, we can design in-house. So there's not as high of a cost for design and it's easier to see what that price is. And if at the time when we come back to council and say, well, we've designed it, we have an estimate and we have this value, it's a question, do you want to proceed? So if you proceed, which is the resolution of necessity, you are going forward. We are going to get bids and you are proceeding, okay? Then there's a final ordinance that actually establishes the final front foot assessment after the work is complete. It's all done. And I don't know, Nick, if is it on the assessment for 20 years or?
It would be for 10 years.
10 years.
There is one step in there that the property owners are able to object. And if there's enough of them, it will go to the equalization board. And they can decide whether to go forward or not after the estimate comes in.
The equalization board is very interesting because we've had that before where it's challenged. I think a lot of times it becomes to whether or not their front footage is correct or whether they can physically make the connection. There's very few exceptions for the equalization board. And the word equalization is, well, if someone gets removed from the assessment, well, everyone else pays the difference. So you got to remember that you're equalizing the cost. The cost of the project's still the same. It's just how you assess an individual. So there can be an argument over the front footage. You think it's 80 foot. We're saying it's, there can be that discrepancy that we resolve, but no matter what, that cost gets redivided and it gets equalized. Just remember that.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. As part of that process also, what did we say? You had 52%?
It was 52.4% of the frontage.
Arguing the percentage being so close, is that part of the argument that may come into?
No.
I realize we can go 50 plus 1, home rule you were saying.
Correct.
But I guess I get concerned about people that are adamant against wanting to do this and they hear what the percentage is. It's like, well, you know what I mean?
Mr. President,
Go ahead, Mr. Mayor.
I was just going to say, if you choose as a council not to order it in at 52%, you have that right. You have the
Yeah,
ability to do
right,
it.
right.
Once it's ordered in, the equalization board cannot take it out just because
Because of
of
that.
the
Right, it's
52%.
going forward.
You've passed that point in time where that would not apply as one of the
Argument.
considerations
Right,
for
okay.
the equalization board. We had some examples where people said their property wasn't benefited because they were served by sanitary sewer from a different location, and they were correct, and you couldn't assess them. So like Mr. Roman said, the total cost of the property was then, if it was divided amongst 10 property owners, that same cost was now divided up against, or among 9 property owners, and everybody's cost went up, except one person that was opted out of this petition.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr.
Thank
President.
you, Mr. Roman. Mr.
Thank
Walenzak.
you, Mr. President. The action that we're looking to take tonight is just the action to allow the Service Department to look at a cost. We're not I know we're talking about the process, but our action tonight is only to ask the Service Department to come up with a cost for a per foot. I think we at least owe it to move past this point and look at what that cost would be. And that's the action we're taking tonight.
I agree, Mr. Walenzak. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President?
Mr. Horniak.
I guess just to clarify on that, there were a couple of questions, just what is the process? What does it go through that I received on this one here? So I guess I just wanted to make sure we illuminated, these are the steps that are taken with these. My assumption would be that this moves forward and probably proceeds all the way forward, as typically has been the case, just to outline what that process looks like. So those that are involved or paying attention know what that looks like. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horniak.
Mr.
Mr.
President.
Reeves, do you have a question?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Roman, when the project is finished, what is the requirements for the residents to have to tap in that, of the 50 or 48% that didn't agree to it?
The rule really comes, Mr. President.
Go ahead, Mr. Roman.
Mr. Reeves, the short answer is 1 year is what's required by the health department. That's what we're required to do. In some cases where, someone just put in a brand new septic, there's been some exceptions where they do allow up to 5 years. But we really can't offer that. We are obligated to say you have 1 year to tie in.
And we can't do a cash attached system.
No, not with this. This would be a public sewer system.
With that being said, how would someone that has just put in a brand new system that hasn't been used yet and it's been approved,
Yeah, it's a tough one.
how would they petition or request to go to the 5 years if they so choose to?
And then let me say this too, so that, with the health department, again, it comes down to whether they order someone to tie in to that sewer. Their rule is when you're in 600 feet of a sewer, you have to tie in if there's a problem. So the one exception is, all right, well, you have a brand new septic. Does it work? Is it working properly? If it's not, obviously that's a problem, even if it's new. The other thing is beyond that 1 year, our sewer regs require that you still are paying for sewer, even though you're not tied in, because that's used as a deterrent to get you to tie in. Okay, so that's another exception to going beyond 1 year. Otherwise, it's permission from the health department to get that extension. So that's what you would go to.
Okay.
You'd write a letter. It'd go to the Lucas County Health Board, and they would agree to give you that extension. You'd have to request that separately. And we did that for people on Norden. Again, the catch is you go beyond 1 year, you're still paying the minimum sewer bill.
right.
Yeah. And so that is a deterrent to get you to tie in. Right?
Mr. President.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Thank you, Mr. Roman.
So
Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
So the only thing that you are getting out of is the connection from your house to the cost of going from your house to the sanitary sewer. All the other costs are assessed as soon as the project's complete.
Okay,
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
thank you.
Councilor Larry, questions or comments on item 102? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to send item 102 to next week's regular agenda.
Mr. President, so moved.
Thank you, Mr. Davish.
Second.
Second by Mr. Horniak. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 102, 2023 will be moved to next week's regular meeting agenda. Next item is item 103, 2023, which is presented by Mayor Michael Safarian and Parks and Recreation Commissioner Tim Borton. And I will defer to Mr. Borton.
Thank you, Mr. President. This ordinance would just allow us to accept the alternative bid of adding the HVAC system into the press box locker room facility that's currently being built. We did just have a conversation in our rec committee meeting about the possibility of finding some alternatives for this, which we'll make sure we try and have for next week's meeting as well. But that's what this ordinance is accepting that alternative for the HVAC system. As we explored some other alternatives and they weren't going to work as well as we previously hoped. So that's what this ordinance provides.
Thank you, Mr. Borton. Council, you have any questions? This is pretty much well discussed before the meeting. Any questions or comments? Hearing none, I will seek a motion to place item 103, 2023 on next week's regular meeting agenda. Mr. Reeves? Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Second by Mr. Drake. Thank you, Mr. Drake. Council, are there any objections? Hearing none, item 103, 2023 will be moved to next week's regular meeting agenda. Council, this does complete all of our agenda items for this evening, and I will now move to the mayor's report.
Thank you, Mr. President. This time I have no report.
Mr. Major?
Thank you, Mr. President. I just have very brief comments about Boomfest. First one is, wow, that was a really good overall event. Great for the city. A lot of people turned out. One real quick one too about the fireworks show, not to get into too many details. As I'm sitting and after the show was over, listening to people walk out, I heard many comments about the greatest fireworks show that they had ever seen. So, and I think there's a lot for $20,000. There's a lot of value to that. So that was a really good show, really good experience, and just a great event.
Mr.
Thank you,
President.
Mr. Major.
I'd like to
No,
go
you
back.
passed by, all right.
I'd like to recant this.
Go ahead, go ahead.
I just want to say a special thanks to Kelly Wolf and Cassie for the time they put in. It was, their efforts were priceless and never ending. In fact, our headliners said they've never been treated so well.
Good.
And so we're really proud of them.
Thank you, Mayor. Ms. Vapora?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Ms. Vapora. Mr. Roman?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Roman. Mr. Reeves?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Terry. Thank you, Mr. Wallenzak. Just a brief comment about our Parks and Recreation Committee meeting today. I thought it was very eventful. We had a lot of different opinions, and I know that we just forwarded the ordinance on for, or the item on for next week's agenda, which we still have the ability to pull back if we so choose to. And I like the fact that we're going to go out and try to see if we can get some alternate, I don't want to say bids, but things that will help make our decision a lot easier if we can get several quotes and things like that from other vendors. So thanks everybody that was at the meeting and for your input. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves. Mr. Drake?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Drake. Mr. Wallenzak?
No report this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Wallenzak. Mr. Davish?
No report.
Thank you, Mr. Davish. Mr. Horniak?
No report, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Horniak. And I have nothing to report this evening either. And we do have a couple people signed in to speak before council this evening. Give me glasses. Dennis Dillon? Did he leave? Okay. Sean Frederick. Step forward, Sean. Would you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Sean Federick. I live at 3525 Brown Road, and we're part of the petition for the sewers for our neighborhood. And everything that set everything in motion here was when the health department came through and did some storm sewer assessments and everything. Excuse me. And a few of the older neighborhood houses were done told that if something ever goes wrong with their septic systems, they have no recourse, no action to take, because they don't have enough property or viable soil to do this. So at this point in time, we looked into our own system. Our own system needs a little TLC. We got the property, we could actually do it, but in light of the other neighbors around us, is why we took this action for this petition. And I just thank you for all your consideration that you're doing and help pushing this through for us and considering this. But thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And council, we have no one else signed in. I will seek a motion to adjourn.
So moved, Mr.
Thank you, Mr. Reeves.
Second.
Second by Mr. Davish. Council, any objections? The meeting is adjourned.
Mr. Dre.